Shalom, shalom, and thank you for joining me today in our study titled The Time Machine of the Most High, the Camp, the Tabernacle, and the Four Living Creatures. So this study has been a wild ride. Now, I know I've said that about a few of my other studies, but this one was crazy and took me to a place I never, ever expected to land. So I had just started editing the Keys to the Creation Calendar series, part 4 video on the stars, and I was really struggling with the recording. The sound and the lighting were just awful. Both are always a challenge for me because I don't really have a good place to record. I don't have a set up studio or anything. It's just in my house or in my RV because we are currently restoring the house. So it's just kind of a mess. So I just record where I can. But this one was super bad. And subsequently, I was getting really frustrated that 3 hours of work just really wasn't worth editing. No matter what I tried, it just sounded like I was in an echo chamber. The lighting was bad. It was a bad scene. But also, during that time, I was really dealing with some personal struggles, which I'm sure attributed to the lousy recording, because my heart really just wasn't in it. I was having some struggles with an old friend, and in those struggles and this things that were coming up between her and I, just brought up a lot of old feelings and old issues that had happened. I mean, this was like a 30-year thing, and I just was really surprised about some of the stuff that was going on. So, but anyway, it was just really a big struggle I was going through, and a few other things, other struggles with some other friendships, and so I just had a lot in my heart that I was trying to reckon with. So I've decided one day I would take a drive up the mountain. The mountain is where I find solace. That's where I speak with Yahuwah. The LaSalle Mountains, the Salt Mountain. Then I go and speak my salt with Yahuwah. And during that conversation, amongst other things, Yahuwah told me I just needed to get my act together. He's like, Aaron, I've got some stuff I want to show you, so you just need to get out of this funk because this is some really important stuff coming down. And as excited as I was to hear about that, I just couldn't seem to pull myself out of it, out of this struggle with this friend, and had to let go of this friend out of my life. And so it took me a few days to work through it, and those were some pretty rough few days. But as things started to clear and my spirit started to change, and I could start feeling the Ruach again and hearing Yahuwah speak again. And so what I first started seeing was the Hebrew wilderness camp merging with the leaders of time wheel that I have been working on for the last several years. Now, this time wheel has evolved over the last 3 or 4 years as my knowledge has grown in Yahuwah's division of days. When he first gave me that picture of the time wheel, it was actually one wheel with 4 smaller wheels around it. And then it just kind of morphed and evolved into greater understanding to what I have today. So from there, I was just started getting these pictures of this time camp and how it fit around the time wheel. And I was typing away and putting it all together and pulling out all my old notes, and because this is something I've studied before but never really just kind of all put it together. And I had about 2.5 weeks in, 27 pages written, thought I was done. Looked pretty good to me. However, while I was editing, the heavens opened up and manna just came pouring down. And I was literally putting in 4 to 6 hours a day, almost daily, on this study. sometimes information was coming so rapidly that I couldn't even type fast enough. And my husband would be talking to me and I'm like, don't distract me. It's coming in fast. I need to get it down. Don't let me forget what I'm doing. Don't just give me a minute. And so with that being said, I do want to take a moment to thank my husband because he could really see that the Ruach was dealing with me. And he took on so many of the daily responsibilities without complaining. He just knew that I was working on something big. I mean, like I said, I literally was putting in 4 to 6 hours almost daily on this because the information needed to be vetted. I will see a picture, but I need to make sure I vet it so that I know that I'm seeing it correctly. And what I was seeing is very, very controversial. But thankfully, a few people are seeing this now too. And I don't know what all that means, and we'll talk more about it. I don't want to get ahead of myself. But I do want to thank my husband for just hanging in there with me and allowing me to have the time to connect with Yahuwah, which allowed me to see and hear this message. So I do have to say it's one of the most exciting studies I have done to date. As I worked to put the puzzle pieces together, other people started becoming involved, including hubby, who was bringing me more pieces, which is why this thing grew to 49 pages. So I also want to thank my sister in Yahuwah, Charlene, who didn't know she held a large puzzle piece, but Yahuwah did. The day he told me to send my picture over to her was a big day indeed. But I will elaborate on that a little later. But moreover, she just cheered me up, prayed for me, encouraged me throughout this study. And for that I am grateful. Because, like I said, the stuff I'm seeing is very controversial and opposed to traditional thought, which we will dig into throughout this study. The problem I have personally is that I find the longer and farther that we get into any specialized study, no matter what it is, whether it's biblical or secular, but when you're in a specialized study, like I am in the calendar, I've been studying the calendar for nearly 26 years. In fact, I was studying the calendar long before I decided to walk the Torah life. So calendars have been a specialized study for me for many, many years, dating way back before 1999, when we all thought the world was going to come to an end, when the computers were all going to just crash. But that didn't happen. So I do find it hard to discuss things with people. I mean, it's kind of like Dr. Ben Carson, explaining brain surgery to a pre-med student. And although I'm no Ben Carson, I'm also not a pre-med student either. So I do find it harder and harder to find people that I can just kind of bounce these things off of. And so I just want to thank those people in my life that I can come to. And there's just a small handful that can actually has enough knowledge to say, oh yeah, that makes sense, or maybe you need to look at it this way. So they give me just really a good foundation of support. And so thank you so much, all of you, and you know who you are. So this latter manna, that I'm going to call it, that came after I thought I was done, it just came so fast and furious, and now due to its size, I might have to do this presentation in 2 parts. Let's see how far I get today, because it's 49 pages. Well, 48 pages plus citations. So you can go to our website and get the PDF and read along, see my citations and where I get some of my information from. But anyway, I really thought I was, just going to be given a nice piece of steak to chew on when the Father said he had something to show me. And well, it ended up being the whole beef, if not the whole herd. So all I'm going to ask of you today is that you have an open mind, and you follow along, check my math, and hopefully be as amazed as I was. Baruch Hashem. Oh, and did I say math? Yeah. It is time to bring the math teacher out of retirement, because there is going to be a lot of math in this study. I mean, after all, it is the Creator's language. Nothing is created without it. It is through this math and studying the tabernacle that I discovered something quite amazing. So I want to spend time breaking it all down so that everyone can understand what I, and apparently, as I found out through the puzzle piece that Sister Charlene held, a few others are discovering as well. But I don't want to get ahead of myself, like I said, so let's begin. So I was taught in school, as we all were, that there are 12 zodiac constellations along the sun's ecliptic course. And then at some point in my life, I understood that these 12 constellations were said to coincide with the 12 tribes of Israel. King David tells us that the stars are fixed in the heavens by our Creator. Psalms 8:3. When I look upon your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have fixed. Yet the Creator actually fixed 13 constellations along the ecliptic. And remarkably, there are 13 blessed tribes of Jacob. As we know, Manasseh and Ephraim were given the blessing of sonship by Jacob and were assigned a designation in the Hebrew wilderness camp. Directly above Scorpius stands a huge figure of a man named Ophiuchus, which means serpent bearer. Ophiuchus stands with one foot directly over the star Antares, the heart of the scorpion, as if to crush the horrid creature. Now the camp reflects the 13 constellations. And we know Joseph had a dream where he and his brothers represented the stars in Genesis 37, verse 9. So then the camp, Moses was given instructions for the 12 tribes to be seated in Yahweh's orderly array around the camp. Joseph, meaning he will add, is not a part of the arrangement, but is given double portion through his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And let's not forget that Dinah was also the daughter of Jacob as well. This gives us a total of 15 main players out of the house of Jacob. The original 12, Manasseh, Ephraim, and Dinah. So how does 15 from the house of Jacob fit into the zodiac's 13 constellations? Hold on to that question while we continue along this expedition of discovery. The Hebrew wilderness camp was set up in such a manner where 12 of the tribes created an outer will, or a wall of protection, surrounding the camp and ultimately the tabernacle, reminiscent of the expression circling the wagons, meaning to join together in order to protect yourselves against attack. They were the first line of defense. 3 tribes each were placed under a standard, or the banner, starting at one of the 4 cardinal directions. Numbers 2:2. Each man having according to his order. This order is the orderly arrangement. According to the standard, to the mark or banner, according to the houses of their patrimony. So under the banners of their fathers, they are lined up. Let the sons of Israel camp opposite round about the tent of the testimony, the sons of Israel shall camp. So the tribes were to camp round about the tabernacle. The Hebrew word for this is sabib, H5439, meaning a circle, round, circuit, compass. In the Greek, the word is kuklo, means a ring, cycle, in a circle, round about. Thus, Numbers 2:2 is telling us that the tribes circled around, compassing the tent of meeting, much like spokes of a wheel. Numbers 2:3, and those encamped on the east side towards the sun rising are the standard of Judah's camp. Starting with the fourth born of Jacob, Judah, at the fourth sun gate in the east, the tribes are seated. Verse 5, and those encamping next to him shall be the tribe of Issachar. Then in verse 7, we're told that also the tribe of Zebulun is next to Judah. Numbers 2:10, on the south side shall be the standard of the camp of Reuben. Verse 12, and those that encamp next to him shall be the tribe of Simeon. And then verse 14 tells us also the tribe of Gad. Numbers 2:17, and the camp of the Levites, with the tabernacle of the congregation, shall pull out in the middle of the camps. As they encamp, they shall pull out, each man in his place by their standards. So after Gad, take notice that Levi is placed in the center before going on to seat the second half of the camp. Within the protective walls of the outer wheel, the tribe of Levi is placed, whom Yahuwah broke down into 5 family camps. These 5 camps are the inner wheel circling the tabernacle, as we just read. Westward, the families of the Gershonites. Southward, Kohath. The family of Merari is northward. And then finally, Moses and Aaron are eastward. So Moses is aligning with Judah in the east, and then Aaron's camp is next to Moses in that eastern quadrant. Hence, surrounding the tabernacle were Moses, Aaron, the head priest, and the sons of Levi, who later King David would name as the gatekeepers. Once the first half of the camp was seated, I was surprised, but not really, to see that the camp was lined up on the time wheel from Reuben to Zebulun in the birth order of Leah's children, each placed at the sun gates mentioned in Enoch chapter 72, correlating with their birth order, with the exception of Gad, who was 7th in overall birth. He takes Levi's place. Levi was 3rd born, but Gad takes his place on the outer wheel as the firstborn of Zilpah, the handmaid of Leah. Gad legally belonged to Leah, as we see with Rachel and her own handmaid Bilhah. So let's quickly go to Genesis 30, verse 1. And Rachel saw that she did not bear to Jacob, and Rachel was jealous of her sister. And she said to Jacob, give me sons, and if there is none, I shall die. And Jacob's anger glowed against Rachel, and he said, am I a Loah, who has kept back from you the fruit of your womb? Why are you blaming me? I'm not a Loah. Verse 3, but she said, behold my servant Bilhah, go to her, and let her bear on my knees. Yea, let me build up from her me also. And she gave her slave girl Bilhah to him for a wife. And Jacob went in to her, and Bilhah conceived and bore a son to Jacob. And Rachel said, Eloah had judged, and has also heard my voice, and has given me a son. So she named his name Dan. Therefore, fitting that the tribe of Gad be the proxy for Levi on the outer wall. Placed next in the camp are the children of Rachel, Numbers 2:18 through 22. On the west side shall be the standard of the camp of Ephraim, and next to him shall be the tribe of Manasseh and the tribe of Benjamin. Ephraim and Manasseh being from Joseph, Rachel's firstborn, then Benjamin, the youngest. And then finally, the two sons of Rachel's handmaid, Bilhah, and the youngest of Zilpah are seated. Numbers 2:25. On the north side shall be the standard of the camp of Dan. And those, which I guess Dan really, now that I'm thinking about this, would be Rachel's firstborn in this instance, on her knee through her handmaiden. And then Asher and Naphtali is with Dan in the north. So the camp is now seated. 12 tribes circling the 5 Levites, circling the tabernacle. A wheel in a wheel. A dodecahedron. No, that's a big word. Dodecahedron means 12 seated. From the word 12, dodeca, and hedra, seat or base. Now, a dodecagon is a 12-sided polygon. Interestingly, a concave dodecagon is a 6-pointed star. This then led me to consider that the 5 families of Levi circling the tabernacle must be symbolic of the enclosed and protected garden of set time. The tabernacle, like the Garden of Eden, is where Eloah dwells, and various details of the tabernacle suggest it is a mini Eden. Like the tabernacle, the garden is oriented eastward. There are 2 cherub in place at the east gate. Symbolically, Yahuwah placed the camps of Moses and Judah at the east gate. The cherub appear only in the context of both sanctuaries, the tabernacle and the temple, and the Garden of Eden. Placed above the ark, the space between the cherubim is the meeting place of Yahuwah. We find that in Exodus 25, verses 17 through 22. And they guard the way to Eden, Genesis 3:24. In both contexts, they are guardians of Yahuwah's dwelling place. Hence, Yahuwah dwelling in the tabernacle was a step toward the restoration of paradise, which is to be completed with the new heaven and earth. Revelation 21 through 22. Now the word garden in Hebrew is gan, G-A-N, and it means an enclosure, an enclosed garden, figuratively a bride. It forms a root from which all ideas of circuit stem from. Defined as a sphere, that which has protective walls, which encloses, surrounds, or covers all parts. That which forms the enclosure of a thing, limits a thing, and protects it, in the same fashion that a sheath encloses, limits, and protects its blade. Also, a complete circuit. The enclosed garden of set time is a place that is protected from the intrusion of outside elements, as related in the Encyclopedia Biblica. And I quote, "The word is derived from the root ganan, meaning to cover, protect. The garden being secluded from the surrounding, uncultivated country and the incursions of strangers, and concealed by overshadowing trees from observation." Unquote. Eden is derived from the Aramaic word Eden, which is from the root word corresponding to time, a set time, a year. It is a garden of set times, a year garden. Ancient civilizations relied upon the apparent circular motion of the sun, moon, and stars and planets as a reference for measuring the passage of time. In the books of Jubilee and Enoch, we are told that the creation cycle is exactly 52 weeks per cycle, or 4 quarters of 13 weeks. Genesis tells us that a week is 7 days, ending with a Sabbath. Therefore, there are 52 Sabbaths to the creation cycle, ending on the 52nd Sabbath. Jubilee 6, verses 29 through 31. "And they placed them on the heavenly tablets. Each had 13 weeks. One from another passed their memorial. Now these would be the leaders at the head of each quarter, which are also the memorials of Noah. From the first to the second, from the second to the third, from the third to the fourth quarters. And all the days of the commandment will be 52 weeks of days, and these will make the entire year complete." So you have to ask yourself, well, what year? What year are we talking about here? They didn't have the Gregorian or the Julian year back then, so this can only be the year established at creation. Thus it is engraven and ordained on the heavenly tablets that there is no neglecting this commandment for a single year or from year to year. So from year to year, the creation cycle is 364 days. Enoch 74, verse 12. "And the sun and the stars bring all the years exactly, so they do not advance or delay their position by a single day unto eternity, but complete the years with perfect justice in 364 days. So in chapter 72, Enoch breaks down each quarter of the creation year by numbering the days of the months within the sun gates or stations. They are numbered as 30, 30, 30, plus 1 intercalary day at the end of each quarter. Therefore, each of the outer wheel tribes represents 30 days of their respective quarters. The individual Levite camp of that quarter represents the 1 intercalary day at the end of the quarter, starting with Aaron, then Merari, Gershon, and ending with Kohath. Now the camp of Moses would account for 1 day as well, but it is the day outside of creation. That would be day 365 of the solar cycle and day 366 every 4th year. Due to the sign given the camp that previous autumnal equinox, the priest would know how many days, 1 or 2, they would have to count before the first day of creation arrived again. The leap year sign is when the straight line shadow appears a day later than the previous 3 years. So between the vernal equinox and the autumnal equinox, we have a set number of days. For 3 years, it's the same number. On the 4th year, the autumnal equinox arrives a day later. It works like clockwork. On the Gregorian calendar, the autumnal equinox typically falls on September 22nd for 3 years. But in the 4th year, it falls on September 23rd. And we had this happen last year in 2023. And we were out there in the autumnal equinox. You can see this on our YouTube channel, marking and verifying this, that it did come a day later. So that was our leap year sign. Thus, the Levites would know when it came a day later on their count between the two equinoxes that it was the leap year. Therefore, on the leap year, the camp of Moses would account for the additional day. He gets the fold back days that are reflected in the 11th mohair curtain, or the goat's hair curtain, that is folded back on itself. And we're going to talk about that curtain in great detail later on in this study. Otherwise, in the regular years, the camp of Moses retains only one day like the rest of the Levites, syncing the creation cycle and the solar cycle at the camp of Moses. Using the camp to track solar days in this way is efficiently simple. Here's another odd math equation to think about. There are 13 tribes represented within the whole camp. Yet there are 17 camps, 12 plus the 5 camps of the Levites. So if we took 17 minus 13, we have 4 quarters to the year. And then there are 12 outer wheel camps. If we subtract the 5 Levi camps, that gives us the sum of 7. 4 sides to a square, and 7 squared is 49. So how's that one for you? I think the number 4 is one of the Creator's favorite numbers because he sure does use it a lot. 49 years to the sabbatical before the Jubilee. However, not only is the whole camp laid out to embody the 4 quarters of the creation's 364-day year and the 365-66 days of the solar cycle, each tribe alone can also represent the 13 lunar sidereal stations of the moon. In the lunar count, each tribe accounts for 4 weeks or 28 days. 4 weeks times 7 days equals 28 days. Within the creation cycle, each quarter comprises of 13 weeks, and the moon circles the earth 13 times within its 364 days of 28 stations. So this would mean that each of the outer wheel tribes would account for 28 days, and the family of Levi, for their respective quarter, now accounts for 1 week instead of 1 day, representing the 13th week. Thus, by year's end, the camp of Levi, minus Moses, would have accounted for 28 days as well. 28 days times 13 tribes, 364 days. The count would start anew at the camp of Moses in the east. Now, we get the sum of days for the lunar stations by averaging the lunar synodic cycle with the lunar sidereal cycle. A lunar synodic month is from one new moon to the next, and it is about 29 days. It varies, but on average. And a lunar sidereal month is the period for the moon to return to the same position compared to distant stars, and it is 27 days. Sidereal is always related to the stars. So the difference between the synodic phase cycle and the sidereal star alignment lengths is due to the orbital movement of the Earth-Moon system around the sun. So we have the Earth, the moon's going around the Earth, and these two are going around the sun. So because of all of that dance that's going on, there's lag time between the two cycles. And because of this difference, we can define the stations of the moon against the stars by averaging these two systems. So if we take 29 plus 27, that equals 56. We divide that by 2 because we're averaging two things, and we have 28 days. Therefore, each lunar celestial station is about 28 days long, multiplied by 13 moon circuits, and we have our 364 days, where the moon aligns with the stars and sun once again. Now, with respect to the stars, the sun creeps eastward only 1 degree per day, whereas the moon moves eastward with respect to the stars by 13 degrees per day. Therefore, we can look at each tribe as being a lunar sidereal station of 28 days, with the tribe of Levi as a whole being the 13th lunar station. And remember, they also allow for the 13th constellation of Ophiuchus. Also, this morning, this tidbit of math was sent to me by my sister Charlene, who wanted to know if this number fit in anywhere. And so she was thinking along these lines that Yahuwah has 7 feasts, and 2 of them start in the evening. So what percentage of those 7 are the nighttime feast? And interestingly, that number is 28.5. 28.5 is 2% of 7, which, given the variations of time for a lunar synodic month, which is anywhere from 29.27 and 29.1 days, anywhere within that range, this percentage then equates to the lunar sidereal stations, 2 evening feasts. We are told that the moon rules the night. So the percentage of the evening feast correlates with the sidereal lunar stations of the moon. Only our Creator, right? Only our Creator. Thanks, sis, for bringing that one up to me this morning. So we see in the story of Jericho this same moon math with the number 13. Jericho was known as the Moon City, and moon worship was central to this community. In the Strong's Concordance, Jericho is defined as a lunation and Yirak, the moon. Israel marched around Jericho for 7 days, once each day for 6 days, but on the 7th, they marched around Jericho 7 times. 6 plus 7 is a total of 13 circuits around Jericho. In the science of numerology, it is said, quote, "He who understands the number 13 will be given power and dominion. It is a number of upheaval and destruction, a symbol of power which, if wrongly used, will wreak havoc and destruction upon itself." Unquote. Just prior to the siege on Jericho, the Hebrews had crossed the Jordan River and set up camp in Gilgal, celebrating the Passover there. Joshua 5:10. And the sons of Israel camped in Gilgal and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at evening in the plains of Jericho. Now the word Gilgal comes from the word Galgal, which means a wheel, heaven, rolling thing. It is where we get the word galaxy from. Therefore, the sons of Israel kept their Passover in the land according to the spinning wheels of the heavens. Remember that Yahuwah wouldn't reveal the Jubilees to the Hebrews until they entered the promised land. Under the lights of heaven, Eloah certified his calendar with his chosen people, assigning to them the task of removing the pagan moon worship calendar of Jericho. Yahuwah's set time appointments are so central to who he is. Why wouldn't our Creator make arrangements of his chosen people in such a way as to represent his very timepiece of meeting with him. That takes us to the leaders of time. Thus far, we have discovered that the Hebrew wilderness camp is set in such a way that it encompasses not only the creation cycle, but syncs the solar cycle and the lunar sidereal stations. Only a masterful creator could design such an orderly arrangement. Enoch tells us it is the stars that are the leaders of time. This is confirmed by Job. Job 22:12. Is not Eloah high in heaven? Also behold the leading stars, for they are high. Notice, Job speaks about the leading stars. The Hebrew confirms this as the words Rosh, Kokab, or head stars are used. Broken down under 4 main leaders, Enoch gives us the names and positions of the star leaders in chapter 82. These are the ones which are the heads over the 4 quarters of Yahuwah's heaven-bound timepiece. So let's see if we can find a celestial alignment here. Starting with Judah, set in the east, Enoch tells us that the first quarter leader in the east is called Malchiel. Enoch 77 verse 1. And the first quarter is called east because it is first. Enoch 82:11. The 4 leaders which distinguish the 4 parts, the 4 quarters of the year, enter first. After them, the 12 leaders of the orders which distinguish the months. Okay, so the 4 quarters enter first. They enter ahead of their quarters. Just as we saw with the Hebrew camp setup. Enoch 82:13. And these are the names of the leaders which distinguish the 4 parts, the 4 quarters of the year, which are fixed. Malchiel, Helamelech, Melajal, and Narel. The first quarter in the Creator's division of time under the leader Malchiel. We find Malchiel, Hebrew number 4439, and it means king appointed by El. Now, we know the tribe of Judah is the tribe of kings. Its ensign is the lion, king of Judah, over the first quarter of the camp, starting in the east. The name Malchi denotes a sense of royalty, leadership, and authority. The suffix ki, in Semitic languages, can be interpreted as an endearing or reverential reference to a leader or king. Thus, the name Malchi encapsulates notions of reverence and respect, signifying someone with esteemed qualities or noble lineage. It is also where we get the name Melchizedek. My king is right. The Messiah is identified as high priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. Hebrews 5:5. So also the Christ has not glorified himself to become a high priest, but he speaking to him, "You are my son today, I have begotten you." Verse 6. As he also says in another place, "You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek." Enoch 82:15. In the beginning of the year, Malchiel rises first and rules, who's named Tamayin, and son, and all the days of his dominion, while he bears rule, are 91 days. Malchiel's reign for 91 days is proof that he is indeed a quarter leader. On the camp wheel dodecagon, the 3 tribes within a quarter would equal 90 degrees. We have 3 times the 30 degrees of the dodecagon. plus the Levi camps is one intercalary day. So we have the 90 plus the 1. Tamayin is the leader of the spring season. It's the vernal equinox. In the Arabic, tam is a verb which means to be fulfilled, to be completed, to come about. Ayin is also an Arabic word meaning time, era, epoch, age, literally meaning the time. It is only at the start of the new festal year where a quarter leader and a seasonal leader align. This alignment is called the Great Gate by Enoch. We can see that the alignment of Judah and Moses to the east replicates the opening of the Great Gate. So what do I mean by festal year? The set time appointments that we are commanded to keep count of are the weekly Sabbaths, yearly feasts, sabbatical, and jubilee years. The Sabbath count, of course, starts with day 1 of creation, whereas day 4 of creation begins the count to the feasts. Why that day and not day 1 of creation? Because day 4 is when the heavens started tracking time. Therefore, the priest started the festal count from the vernal equinox. Also, this cycle of 7 and 4 assures that no feast days fall on the weekly Sabbath. Malkiel and Tamayin sister together at the new festal year cycle with the new season cycle at the head of the first quarter. This is the only place in the cycle where this sistering happens. Thus, the Great Gate. Psalm 65:11. You shall bless the crown of the year because of your graciousness, and your plains shall be filled in fatness. So this word crown in Hebrew is atar. It's a primitive root meaning to encircle, to crown, to compass. You shall bless the head of your circular year, marked by Judah, the tribe of kings. Next, the star leader, according to Enoch, is Helamelech in the north. The name Helam, Hebrew 1987, means smiter. Helamelech thus means the king that smites. The tribe of Dan is the banner over the north. However, recall when the camp was set, the tribe of Levi entered before Dan was seated. Thus the tribe of Levi with Merari, meaning bitter, to the north of Judah, I believe represent the leader in the north quarter, Helam, the smiter king, as it was written. Deuteronomy 33 verse 8. And of Levi he said, 33:11, bless Yahuwah, his substance, and accept the work of his hand. Smite through the loins of them that rise against him, and of him that hate him, that they rise not again. So perhaps this is a reflection of Revelation 7 and Dan's absence from the sealing of the 144,000. Levi takes Dan's place in this leadership. Dan is gone. He's not sealed within the 144,000. So I think this is a reflection of that, because it is Levi that is attached to the smiting. So Enoch continues to give us the name of Melajah, or Melajah. I've seen that too, Melayah. And it means Yah fulfills, or Yah's abundance, as the leader over the third quarter in the west. Mela, Hebrew word 4391, means to fill, be full, corresponding to the Hebrew 4390, which is mala, meaning to fill, be full, fullness, abundance, to consecrate, fill the hand. So Melejal aligns with the tribe of Ephraim in the west quarter. Now Ephraim, Hebrew 66:9, means fruitfulness, double fruit, fullness. Matching right up there with Melejal. Perfectly. And then we have finally Reuben in the south. Now Reuben, Hebrew word 7205, means see ye a son, from the Hebrew 7200 and 1121. Hebrew 7200 is ra, a primitive root meaning to see, approve, behold, enjoy, have experience, gaze, lo, look, mark, be near, perceive, present, regard, have respect, view, visions. And of course, ben, 1121, means a son, age, appointed to, one born, young bullock, young calf, child, servant, whelp, worthy, young one, youth. And the name that we're given from Enoch, Narel, means son of El, and is the leader of the fourth and final quarter of the year according to Enoch. Nar, coming from 5288, means a boy from the age of infancy to adolescence. Babe, boy, child, lad, servant, young man. So we have not only found that the four leaders of time spoken of in Enoch align with the chief Israelite tribes, it is believed that they are also represented through the four living creatures in John the Revelator's vision. So next we're going to go look at the four living creatures. Revelation 4, starting with verse 2. And immediately I existed in spirit, and behold, a throne was situated in the heaven, and upon the throne one sitting. And he who sat there looked like a jasper stone, and sardis, and a rainbow was around. A circle, sphere, enclosure. This word around. So this rainbow was around the throne, looking like an emerald. Verse 4. And around the throne I saw 24 thrones, and on the thrones I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white clothing, and they had crowns of gold on their heads. 24 elders are symbolic of the 24 hours in a complete day, as they sit closest to the throne in the center of the heavenly camps, Holy of Holies. Revelation 4:5. And out of the throne come forth lightnings and thunders and voices, and 7 lamps of the fire are burning before the throne. These are the 7 spirits of Eloah. The Torah text explains that the menorah is to have 6 branches coming out of the central shaft, making for 7 lamps. The 7-lamp menorah is the exemplification of time itself, a replication of the creation week. The menorah's 7 lamps are appointed, one to each day of creation, with the 4th lamp aligning with the straight way of the central shaft. A beautiful representation of the 4th day of creation, where all the heavenly lights are aligned and were set into motion. The sun rising due east up the center shaft of the heavens, casting a straight line shadow throughout the day, giving man the heavenly marker in which to keep track of the Creator's set times. It could also be said about the menorah that it tracks the equinoxes and the solstices as well, marking off the seasons of time through the sun gates, just like the armillary we use today. Revelation 4, verse 6. And a glassy sea before the throne like crystal, and in the midst of the throne and around the throne were 4 living creatures, full of eyes before and behind. Verse 7, and the first living creature was like a lion, and the second living creature like a calf, and the third living creature having a face like a man, and the fourth living creature like an eagle flying. So biblically, east is always first, making south always to the right. Knowing this, we can align the faces of the lion in the east, the calf in the south, the man in the west, and finally the eagle in the north. Verse 8, and the four living creatures, each one had 6 wings round about, and within being full of eyes, and they had no rest day and night, saying, Holy, 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 Yahweh Eloah Almighty, the one who was and is coming. Verse 9, and whenever the living creatures shall give glory and honor and thanks to the one sitting on the throne, to the one living to the ages of the ages, the 24 elders fall down before him on the throne, and they will worship the one living to the ages of the ages, and will throw their crowns before the throne, saying, Eloah, you are worthy to receive the glory and the honor and the power, because you created all things, and through your will they exist and were created. 6 wings round about. Take notice the camp wheel and how each head tribe has 3 tribes to either side on the outer wheel, all connected, just like Scripture describes. So I wish at this point I could tie a pretty bow around this study and end it here, connecting the wilderness camp leaders to John the Revelator's vision of the 4 living creatures and call it good. Like many do, aligning the head eagle to the constellation Scorpius, and then with the tribe of Dan, and call it a day. However, this is something that has bothered me ever since I started studying this topic years ago. The idea of Scorpius being an eagle just doesn't fit. Now, perhaps people are willing to believe this because the other 3 faces seem to align with the right constellations, which then only leaves Scorpius in the correct location, so it must be the eagle. But like I said, that just has never sat right with me. In the Hebrew, the word for this eagle is nashir, meaning to lacerate, and can mean eagle or any large bird of prey. Now, Scorpius, Latin for scorpion, or literally translated as the creature with the burning sting, has also been believed to be a winged serpent or a seraph. Some say that this is the eagle part of the seraphim that is tied to the constellation Scorpius, even though Scorpius has never, ever, in any lore or myth, been an eagle or any other bird, nor been associated with a bird or turned into a bird. A serpent or dragon maybe, but not a bird. Especially not the regal eagle. Therefore, where do we find the eagle in the heavens? In Revelation, the word used for eagle in the Greek is from the root air, A-E-R, and it basically means air, like the air we breathe. The 12th brightest star in the heavens is Altair, the main star in the constellation Aquila, the eagle. It was thought that its name, Aquila, was given to this constellation when it was near the summer solstice. And note that the eagle sits at the head of the second quarter where we find summer, and that the bird of the highest flight was chosen to express the greatest elevation of the sun in the north at the summer solstice. And although not one of the zodiac constellations on the ecliptic, Aquila does straddle both the Milky Way and the celestial equator. Therefore, if the constellation Aquila, with its bright star Altair, is the rightful eagle of the living creatures, this would then direct us to a whole different field of stars to consider. The zodiac constellations, which we have all associated with these faces, run along the line of the sun's travel. But along the celestial equator line, there are 15 constellations. As I mentioned, Aquila, the eagle, is one of. The celestial equator is an imaginary line that extends from Earth's equator out into space, running along our horizon, separating north and south with an east-west orientation. Keep this in mind as we go through the tabernacle part of the study. Now recall, there are 15 children attributed to the house of Jacob. The original 12 brothers, Ephraim, Manasseh, and Dinah. The 15 constellations that intersect the celestial equator are visible from most places on Earth, but are not circumpolar, which means they're visible throughout the year. Circumpolar stars are closer to our poles, and so we see them throughout the whole year. These are celestial equator stars, constellations. So out of the 15, there are currently 6 zodiac constellations intersected by both the equator and the ecliptic. So 15 constellations, 6 of which zodiac constellations are also a part of. And these are Aquarius, the face of man; Leo, the face of lion; Taurus, the face of the calf; Ophiuchus, Pisces, and Virgo. When we add Aquila as the face of the eagle, we perfectly tie the constellations of the 4 living creatures to the 15 equatorial constellations. The 4 living creatures right where we're told they are to be. This makes complete sense on the wilderness camp level, as the tribes are on the horizontal plane like these stars, not overhead like the zodiac, but they are marking time with the camp. Even though there are several zodiac constellations in this group, equatorial constellations are not to be confused with constellations intersected by the zodiac ecliptic. The celestial equator, as mentioned, is a projection of Earth's equator into space, while the ecliptic is the Earth's orbital plane. While these two intersect, the 12 zodiac constellations and Ophiuchus and the constellations on the celestial equator are 2 separate groups, not to be confused with one and the other. And the total of the 15 equatorial constellations are Taurus, Leo, Ophiuchus, Aquarius, Pisces, Virgo, Aquila, Canis Minor, Cetus. Cetus is the 3rd largest constellation in the southern sky. Eridanus, talked a lot about Eridanus in past studies, which is the River Jordan. Orion, Monoceros, which is the unicorn, Hydra, sextans, and serpents. Thus the living creatures are set round about the Earth's equator, like the tribes around the tabernacle, marking time until the bridegroom returns. Just as one mystery is solved, another presents itself, inasmuch as there is another account of the four living creatures that we must address. Ezekiel's wills. Ezekiel 1:1. And it happened in the 30th year, in the 4th month, in the 5th of the month, I was among the captives by the river Chebar. The heavens were opened, and I saw visions of Eloah. On the 5th of the month, the 5th year of captivity of Jehoiakim the king, coming the word of Yahuwah became known to Ezekiel the son of Buzi, the priest in the land of the Chaldeans. Now, the Chaldeans were the stargazers, by the river Chebar, and there the hand of Yahuwah was on him. Now, as I was adding in these scriptures to this study, something piqued my interest about all the precise dates and numbers. The first thing that caught my eye was the sequence of 3, 4, 5. It was 30, 4, 5. So 3, 4, 5. Then a double 5 in the next verse. These numbers were just screaming out at me like there was some kind of meaning here, but I wasn't sure what they were saying. So first I looked at the calendar to see if there was anything special about that particular day. Well, there wasn't. Then I looked at the meaning of the name Jehoiakim to see if there was a clue there, and it means Yahuwah will establish. Wasn't sure if that was a clue or not. Then I just decided to add the numbers together, see what I got. So we did 30 plus 4 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5. That equals 49. 7 sevens. So was this a sabbatical year before the Jubilee? And at the end of Ezekiel's vision, another 7 is revealed and mentioned twice, as if to confirm the hidden message at the beginning of the book. Okay, now so the word Chebar means time augmented. The augmented time are the days out of time that Enoch names as 2 leaders over days. They're called Halo, Jasaph, and Asphael. These are the leaders over days 365 and 366 of the solar cycle, respectively. Both the words Jasaph and Asphael come from the same root as the name Joseph, meaning to add, augmented. So I just thought that it was interesting that Chebar means augmented time. So were these the last days of the year of the sabbatical before the Jubilee? Makes me wonder. Okay, so we're going to go back to Ezekiel 1, verse 5. And in the midst was a likeness of 4 living creatures, and this is their appearance, a likeness of a man unto them. And there were 4 faces to the one, and 4 wings. This word is kanaf, and it means quarters. So there was 4 quarters to the one. Remember, they had 6 wings. So they had 6 wings and 4 quarters. This is 4 quarters. Verse 7, and their legs were straight and their feet feathered. Feet feathered indicate that they were winged. These were flying creatures. And there were sparks as flashing brass, and their wings were light. Now, this is out of the Apostolic Bible Polyglot, this translation of this verse, where in Ezekiel 1:7 in the Modern King James, it says that the sole of the feet were like the soles of a calf. So in the Modern King James Version, this same verse reads, and their feet were straight feet, and the sole of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot. So their feet were straight instead of their legs, and their feet were like a sole of a calf's foot instead of being feathered. And they sparkled like the color of burnished copper. So in the Septuagint, in the Greek, where it says their legs were straight and their feet feathered, translating into winged, where we just read in the King James, the feet were straight and they were like the soles of the calf. Yet the feathered feet would be, like I said, an expression of something that flies. So we see how this is applying to the four faces. They're the four quarters. They are flying creatures. Verse 8, and they had hands of a man under their wings on their four sides. They four had their faces and their wings. So this word hand is yod, and it just indicates power and direction. Verse 9, their wings were joined to one another, and they turned not where they went. They went every one straight forward. Verse 10, as for the likeness of their faces, they four had the face of a man and the face of a lion on the right side, and they four had the face of an ox on the left. They four also had the face of an eagle. So Ezekiel is shown a different rotation of the four living creatures than that of John the Revelator. In order to give myself a better visual of what was happening here, I added Ezekiel's living creatures rotation to the camp wheel along with the revelation order, so I could get an easy comparison of the two different configurations. According to Ezekiel, the face of a man is in the direction of the east. And we know this because we are told that the face of the lion is on the right. Now, the Hebrew word for this right-sided direction is yamin, and it means the right hand or side of a person or object, as the stronger, more dexterous, the south. And the ox is on the left side, semole, meaning dark, as enveloped, the north. Hence, by orientation, the left hand side, which is just the opposite of what we're taught in the mainstream world, where left-handed people are called southpaws, when they are actually northpaws. Ezekiel 1:16. And the side of the wheels, the ophon, and their action was as the side of beryl stone. So this is the color of stars. And there was one likeness to the four, and their work was as if it may be a wheel in a wheel. Now the Hebrew word ophon means to revolve and is used for these wheels, giving us the understanding that although the faces are fixed, there was movement within the wheels. Ezekiel 1:18. As for their rings, they were so high that they were dreadful, and their rings were full of eyes round about them four. So the word ayin is the primitive Hebrew word meaning an eye, and by analogy, a fountain, meaning knowledge. So in other words, the revolving wheels were full of knowledge being sent to Ezekiel. So let's break it down a little bit more so we can understand why Ezekiel's account is different than that of John's. John's vision is a representation of the creation of all things in the very beginning, before the earth became void, before the fall of Hallel, also known as Ha-Satan, and before Adam was placed in the garden. This was the age of Leo. In fact, the whole theme of Revelation chapter 4 is about the one living to the ages of the ages, ending with, you created all things, and through your will they existed and were created. So John's revelation of the four faces is surrounded with the idea and the theme of creation. So the age of Leo began around 10,000 BC to approximately 7736 BC. Some identify the age of Leo as the Golden Age. Mainstream archaeological understanding of this period primarily pertains to the Neolithic Revolution. This period saw a significant surge in human societal development. Settlements grew into villages and small societies, all prior to the fall of Hallel, the cause of the void and the darkness that fell over the earth. Therefore, the configuration of Revelation's living creatures is a reflection of the creation of all things in the age of Leo. The revolving wheel in a wheel moves like clockwork, ticking off from the beginning to the end, the Alpha and the Omega, the Messiah who told us that he would meet us back here on earth at the end of the age to settle all matters. You can see more about this in our Keys to the Creation Calendar series, part 3 about the stars and some of this age math that I go over. But we are on the cusp of this clock clicking over from Revelation's account to Ezekiel's vision of the new age of Aquarius, the face of man. Interestingly, there are 7 ages from Leo to Aquarius, 7 days of creation, 7 Sabbaths to the Feast of Oaths, to Shavuot, 7 years to a sabbatical, and 7 sabbaticals to a jubilee. Also, if we count from the age of Adam's creation in Taurus, Ophiuchus, the serpent bearer, is the 7th age. An interesting little side math. Adding the actual years of the age of Taurus through Ophiuchus totals 14,544 years. Dividing that by the 12 tribes, we get the sum of 1,212, or double 12, as in heaven is on earth. And let's break it down a little farther to add 1 plus 2 plus 1 plus 2, which equals 6. And we are currently in the 6th age from the first creation in Leo. So we can look at 3 ages as being the ages of Adam. Starting with Taurus, the age of Taurus, Adam was created and put into the garden. The age of Aries, and our current age of Pisces. So when we add the actual number of years of those 3 ages, the total is 7,200 years. Now tell me that isn't by divine design. 100 degrees of star movement for the time counting Adam. Through the priestly order, tracking of the ages can be achieved by counting the leap years of the families of Shechaniah and Gamuel. This information is via the Dead Sea Scroll 4Q319, where they're tracking the Jubilees. All timekeepers throughout antiquity tracked the leap years as part of the equation of the Saros cycle, which predicts solar and lunar eclipses. Therefore, through the priestly order, it would be easy to track the 72 years that advances the stars 1 degree of movement in the heavens, also known as the precession of the equinoxes. You can see more on this in our study, The Moon and the Priestly Order, and part 2 of the Keys of the Creation Calendar on the Moon. I don't know, these numbers just run crazy through my head. Ezekiel's final account. Ezekiel 10:1. And beheld, and behold, upon the firmament, above the head of the cherubim, was a likeness of a throne of sapphire stone over them. And he said to the man clothed by the robe, Enter into the midst of the wheels, reach underneath the cherubim, and fill your hands full of coals of fire, from out of the midst of the cherubim, and scatter them upon the city. And he entered before me. In this account of Ezekiel, the word will used here isn't Ophan, but rather Galgal, heaven's rolling wheel. The messenger is instructed to reach into the center of the Creator's galactic timepiece and take hot coals from underneath the cherubim. Notice that this is a plural cherub. These can only be the two cherub that graced the top of the Ark of the Covenant, which is the center of the Holy of Holies, the center of Yahweh's galactic clock, where he sits above the cherub. The burning coals are a symbol of judgment coming down on the city and the people dwelling there. Ezekiel 10:3. And the cherubim stood at the right, which is the south side of the house, in the entering of the man, and the cloud filled the inner court. Verse 6. And it happened, when he had commanded the man, clothed with the holy robe, saying, Take fire from between the wheels, between the Galgal, from between the cherubim. And he went and stood beside the wheels, beside the Ophan. We got two different concepts going here. This Galgal, the galaxy, and the rolling wheels. This is all pertaining to time. Ezekiel 10:7. And the cherub stretched out his hand into the midst of the fire of the one being in the midst of the cherubim. And he took and put it unto the hands of the one being clothed by the holy robe. And he took it and came forth. Verse 9. And when I looked, behold, the four wheels, the Ophan, the circuits, this word Ophan means circuits, by the cherubim, one Ophan by one cherubim, another Ophan by another cherubim. The appearance of the Ophan was as the color of carbuncle. Now, carbuncle is also the color of stars. So Ezekiel is describing for us the four heads of the heavenly quarters, the four leaders of time, the four leaders of the camp. Verse 10, and as for their appearance, they four had one likeness, as a wheel had been in the midst of a wheel. And these wheels are called Galgal, the rolling thing, galaxy, heaven's rolling wheel, in my hearing. Verse 14, and four faces were to each. The first face was the face of a cherub, and the second face, a face of a man, and the third, the face of a lion, and the fourth, the face of an eagle. So Ezekiel's last vision of the four living creatures once again has a different arrangement still. There is an addition of the cherub in the east and deduction of the bull. What happened to the bull? I read a few articles that want to claim that the bull is the angelic cherub, but never once throughout this chapter is the bull or ox ever mentioned. Verse 15, and the cherub departed. This is the living creature which I saw by the river Chabar. And the word river is Nahar, and it means assembly. And of course we know Chabar means time augmented. So the assembly of augmented time. He says, and the cherubim departed, and this living creature which I saw by the river, by the assembly Chabar, time augmented. Verse 16, and in the cherubim going, the wheels, the Ophan, the circuit went, and these were next to them, and in the lifting away of the cherubim of their wings to raise up on high from the earth, their wheels did not turn, and indeed they, the ones next to them. Ezekiel confirms that he is seeing the same galactic clock that he has seen before. the assembly of augmented time. But now the wheels are not turning. They are done keeping time for the story of Adam. They are being lifted away from earth as the kingdom of Eloah comes down to reign forever in Olam time. That is forever time. Olam time is forever time. It can be past time and future time. It just means all of time. For Olam time, forever time. So the wheels are no longer spinning, keeping track of Adam's time. As New Jerusalem comes down, the wheels are done. They're done keeping time for us. Ezekiel 10:18, and the glory of Yahweh went from the threshold of the house and stood over the cherubs. And the cherubs lifted their wings and rose up from the earth in my sight. When they went out, the wheels, the Ophan, also went with them. And he stood at the door of the gate of the house of Yahuwah, the eastern gate. And the glory of the Eloah of Israel was over them from above. The eastern gate is also called the sun gate, and it served to mark the equinoxes. It is also the place where the Prince Messiah shall return at the end of the age. Ezekiel 44:1, and he returned to me by the way of the outer gate of the holies, of the one looking according to the east, and it was locked. And the Creator said to me, this gate having been locked will not be open, and no one will go through it, for Yahuwah, the Creator of Israel, will go through it, and it will be locked. So the Creator banished the first Adam through the east gate of his garden of set time. Then Yahuwah himself exited, locking the gate behind him, until the appointed time of the second Adam's return to the garden as a prince preparing to be coronated as king. Second Adam, the Alpha and the Omega, replaced the bull as the final sacrifice. Ezekiel 44:3. For the one leading, this means exalted one, the chief, this one shall sit down in it and eat bread before the Creator. He, the one leading, the Messiah, shall enter by the way of the columned porch of the gate, and according to its way he shall go forth. This east gate, he's going to go forth according to this straight road. So the prince shall enter through the markers of the east gate, replicating the camp with Judah and Moses in the heavens with the star leaders Malkiel and Tamayin. And another thing here I just want to bring up is the return of the Messiah. You know, and we all speculate that the Messiah is going to return at maybe Yom Teruah or at Sukkot. And I've always been of the thought that the Messiah would return on Day of Atonement. That Yom Teruah was calling, saying he's on his way. The trumpets announced the coming of the bridegroom, announced the coming of the Messiah. So I've always thought that Yom Teruah was the announcement of his return, and Yom Kippur was the day he returned to give us atonement. But if we really look at what's being told to us, we're told that the prince returns through the east gate. And Ezekiel just told us that he stood over the house of Yahuwah at the east gate. So in Ezekiel 10:19 and Ezekiel 44, we're being told that the prince is coming through the east gate. And this east gate serves to mark the equinoxes. So we conclude that perhaps at the end of the age, because a new age is marked at the equinox, because that's where the ages are counted, is at the spring equinox, that is when the Messiah is going to return. At the spring equinox, at the end of the age, marking the new age, at the east gate. I don't know, when you break it down like that, it makes a lot of sense. So the Creator banished the first Adam through the east gate of his garden of set times, when Yahuwah himself exited and locked it behind him. So the second Adam, the Alpha and the Omega, replaced the bull as its sacrifice. So all of this is replicated in the camp with Judah and Moses in the heavens with the star leaders Malkiel and Tamayin. Baruch Hashem. Therefore, if the revelation narrative of the four living creatures is the start of all things in the age of Leo, and Ezekiel's first vision is pointing us to the seventh age, the age of Aquarius, where the Messiah will reign for 1,000 years, after which Hallel, Ha-Satan, is released for a little while. We read about that in Revelation 22 and 3. Then, the last vision of Ezekiel clearly represents the final judgment, the final sacrifice of the wicked, and Yahuwah's kingdom on earth with the Messiah at the helm. Adam's story is completed. Notice the alignment of Ezekiel's two visions. Each leader of time has clicked over one quarter, with the cherub now at the east gate, across from the lion in the west. Isaiah 44:13. The carpenter stretched out his rule. He marked it out with a line. He fitted it with the planes, and he marked it out with the compass, and made it after the figure of a man, according to the beauty of man, that it may remain in the house. So this is where we will end part 1 of the time machine of the Most High. We have learned how the camp was laid out not only to track the creation cycle so that the Sabbaths and feasts could be properly observed, but how it was also synced with the solar cycle at the camp of Moses. The camp's setup also aligned with the lunar tracking of the sabbatical and jubilee years, as verified in the Dead Sea Scrolls. We were also able to establish that these very leaders over the 4 quarters of the wilderness camp aligned with the 4 star leaders over the quarters of the heavenly star clock, as named in Enoch chapter 82. Their banners representing the 4 living creatures, which are marking the ages of Adam until the return of the Messiah, confirming for us that the Messiah will indeed return at the end of the age, as promised, ushering in the new age of the living waters. In part 2, we will examine the hub of the camp itself, the Tabernacle. Not only will we see how the curtains are tied to the time machine, but the very frame and size has meaning as well. Here is where we will find the controversy, as the math proves something completely different than we have been taught and have come to believe about the dwelling place of the Creator. So hold on for a thrilling ride of discovery through the language of the universe. As they say, the math never lies. And as always, if you have questions, feel free to contact me at remnantofthelight@gmail.com and our website, remnantofthelight.net. You can find the PDF of this study on that website. So I just want to give Yahuwah all the praise and glory for telling me to get my act together so that he could give me this information that I can share with you and for you to do with what you will. And until then, I'm going to wish you Shalom. Shalom.
Shalom, shalom.